Hi there, welcome back to The Everyday Artisan. I am Jackie and I'm so glad you decided to join me here today. If you're new to my channel, I hope you enjoy what you're going to see. And if you've been here for a while, my sincere gratitude continues to go out to you as we create a community of people who like to work with their hands. So this time of year is gray, is dull. If you go outside and you look closely though, you'll see little bits of springtime starting to emerge. Bulbs starting to put up their shoots, a little bit of greening on dying plants. My chickens are getting more active, as you might have seen. And I like to think of this time of year as another opportunity to celebrate the returning of the light. Many cultures have celebrations around this time of year. Asian countries celebrate the Spring Festival or Lunar New Year. Celtic lore has a festival around this time of year called Imbolc, and it centers on the goddess Bridget, which, as Christianity swept through Europe in the Middle Ages and a little bit earlier, Bridget was again synthesized into Christianity. She was a goddess and now she has become a saint, Saint Bridget. Both the goddess Bridget and Saint Bridget are known for fire in their mind. This is kind of interesting because it is kind of a reflection, especially in these northern climates where we might tend to be physically a little bit less active, but mentally we are thinking. There's fire in our mind. We're thinking about springtime. I know I'm thinking about seed catalogs and starting to get my ideas from my gardens, which I always get overexcited about. We're sometimes thinking about trips we might be planning for the springtime, or we might be planning for what our summer vacation might look like. So while we might seem to be quiet, there's a lot going on inside. Thinking about that, it's a really good time to make more candles. I love candles, I admit it. I always look for an excuse to light a candle in the winter time, and Imbolc or Candlemas Day is a nice time to make candles, maybe for the new year or maybe for birthdays through the year. I remember as a little girl, I think February 2nd, or which was Candlemas Day, you could bring your candles to the church to be blessed. And I remember reading somewhere that on February 2nd or around February 2nd, candles were often dipped because the air was cooler, making it easier for the wax to harden and making the task a little bit easier. So maybe the whole year's worth of dipped candles would be made, or poured candles would be made this time of year. So today I'm going to show you 3 ways to make candles. A super easy way, a rolled candle, a medium easy way, poured candles, which I just have a little sample to show you, and then another easy way easier than you think it might be, but hand dipped candles. They're all lovely. I like to make them. I put them aside, maybe use them for a birthday or a full moon celebration, or just to celebrate different holidays this time of year. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. This here is pressed beeswax. It comes in sheets and you can buy it through Amazon. General needs are just some pots, some pans, a little bit of wicking, scissors, and I have 1 silicone mold. Starting with the pressed beeswax sheets, I kind of cut them in half. They're very long, so they don't need to be quite so big. If you use the entire sheet, you'd end up with a big fat pillar candle, which could always be fun too. I like to cut a diagonal and some lower, smaller types of candles. So just cutting small strips of them as well. I cut my wicks ahead of time so that they're all set to go and I can roll when I get rolling. The hardest part of rolling candles is just getting started. I like to press my wick down nice and tight before I get rolling. And then I like to take and pinch that on, pressing it on firmly with my fingers to tuck that wick down and permeate it a little bit with some beeswax. As you roll, you want to keep your tops and bottoms even. I kind of press along the way. And there's the first part. I want to make this into a votive candle, so I'm going to add some more beeswax to it. It wasn't quite as fat as I wanted it. So I cut myself a second sheet of beeswax. Carefully lining it up. This part will be hidden inside, but you still want to make it as close as possible, mostly just so that you have a nice solid candle along the way. Slowly pressing it, and make sure that you press really tightly. It's surprising. It's kind of, again, finding that in-between spot. Not so tight that it's crushed, but also tight enough so that it isn't like loose. You want to give it a couple good squeezes. That kind of presses all that honeycomb shape down into it so that it tightens it up, firms it up. It helps the candle burn better if it is tightly rolled. The longer candles are a little bit harder to keep nice and consistent, so pressing that wick down nice and tight really helps a lot. Also making sure it's really horizontal along the bottom there. And I pinch starting in the middle and then go out to the edges, pressing that wick nicely down into the beeswax. Once it's nice and secure, you can start to roll it, and you have to kind of roll consistently along the way. So the first little bit is a little bit fussy. Just keep pressing with your fingers. This is one of those little tasks, especially if you're doing this with children. Very good for fine motor skills. Once you get it started, it rolls up very nicely. Again, pressing down along the way so that it doesn't get too much air in it. You want to keep pressing it down. Checking that edge, pressing that close in. And now giving it some nice squeezes. I like to check my bottoms. If they're a little bit wonky, I kind of press them in. I like them flat. That's a matter of preference, I'm sure. This triangle candle is kind of fun. It ends up making a taper candle, so whereas the other two were cylinders, when you cut it in a triangle, and you can cut it in various angles, it doesn't have to be a 45 the way I did it, but it's the same exact process, but you get a nice swirl on the outside of the candle. As you're rolling it, you'll start to see the swirl come along. I keep pressing the bottom, make sure that that bottom doesn't get askew. And there you go. The swirl is such a lovely little detail. Children love doing this one. And there you have it, 3 little candles, different sizes, all from the same type of beeswax sheet. The next candle we're going to make is a dipped candle. So you want to get a pot set up to make a double boiler, get your beeswax out, fill a coffee can, or in this case it was a pineapple juice can, with your beeswax. Fill it up nice and heavy because the can with the air in it will end up floating in the pot kind of crookedly, so you want to weight it down with as much beeswax as possible. It will melt down very small, as you can see. While it's melting down, I tend to try to swirl it a bit, try to break it up. I just use an old chopstick or a stick of some sort. I also use old chopsticks to tie my wicking on so that I can have a handle to dip my candles from. Some people just dip the string right in, but I try to keep my hand away from the steam as much as possible. So the first dip, you're kind of just doing a real quick one, and then you want to pull your wick straight. If you don't, you'll end up with a really wavy candle. Sometimes kids like to make a twirly candle at this point, wrap it around something or bend it and make a wiggly candle. But I generally just like to have my candles be straight. Do that a couple times, dip it in, hold it straight till it forms itself strongly enough that you can hang it and it will hang straight. There we go. You can see a little curve in this one. It kind of curved when it was hanging, so it constricted on one side. I keep dipping and I keep correcting until I feel really good about the shape of the candle. So again, just holding it in place as the wax dries will take that curvature out of it. The other thing that I want you to notice is that you get a little ball of wax at the very end. I like to pinch it off every so often and kind of press that wax in so you'd end up with a nice straight taper as it goes down and not a really full fat taper on the bottom, which kind of looks a little fussy. The other thing is that I always dip at least 2 candles at a time, because if you don't and you just keep dipping your candle in, you're just going to melt the wax right back off again. So you want to alternate, allowing it to cool a bit in between. Ideally, you might be doing 6 or 12 candles at a time if you're dipping, but you do want to dip out, let it drip, and then move it off to the side and let it harden. I've got both my candles here. Taking my time, one, let it drip. Correcting it as I need to. Pulling that extra wax off the bottom. And you just keep dipping until your candle has the diameter or the circumference that you would like. Nice and full on the bottom, narrow at the top. Taking care to correct along the way. Sometimes you end up with a little bulge or a little droplet on the bottom, and you can press those things or massage those things with your fingers until they're all gone. Keep checking that base, and then I don't just leave it, I do bend it back into shape so that I end up with a very pretty candle. As the candles take shape, you kind of just know when you're done. They could be quite fat. They could be, almost an inch in diameter with this wicking, so you could keep going. But I like mine more or less about 3/4 of an inch in diameter because they're not too tall. Depends on how tall your can is. You can buy candle making cans, but you have to spend a lot of money on beeswax if you want to fill one of those tall ones and make very long dipped candles. After they've cooled, I wrap them up in a little bit of tissue or wax paper and tie them up, getting them ready as a little gift for a niece of mine. The next candle is a little poured candle, and I got this little owl mold just off of Amazon. I had bought an owl candle at a flea market or a farmer's market at one point, and it was so sweet. And I saw this little mold on Amazon and I just had to have it. It was only $4 or $5, and I'm using a T-pin to help center my wick in there, and I snug my wick down nice and tight. You can see it is upside down, so you're pouring it in from the bottom. Just using a measuring cup with a little bit of a spigot on the front, to pour it. It is a little bit fussy, messy. I've sometimes used funnels to help make it go quicker. This one I made a little bit of a mess. I wasn't too worried about it. It was on wax paper, all hardened, and then I just take that wax and I throw it back into my pot once it's hardened. Center my T-pin after it is poured and just let it sit. Checked on it for a little bit, got some little bit of the extra wax off of it. The silicone is quite flexible. Once I was confident that the owl was really sturdy and hard enough to pull out of the mold, it just unfolds off of it. It was quite surprising. And there she is, wise old Mrs. Owl. The final step is to pull out the T-pin. I try to pull it out firmly but gently so I don't crack the beeswax. Do a little bit of trimming of the wick, trim off the bottom to even it out. Trim off any little edges that don't look quite right. Shape up the bottom so it sits nicely on a surface. And there we go, all set. I hope you enjoyed this video. They make beautiful table centers or gifts for family and friends. Take care. Thanks for joining me.